Good morning all my diploma students. This morning we are going to do the respiratory system, and I would like all of you to take your textbooks and turn to page 161 to 178 in order for you to be able to follow the whole lecture as we go along. We're going to start with the expected outcomes, and after working through this content you should be able to do the following: describe the location and structure of the nose and nasal cavity, as well as the pharynx, the larynx, the trachea, gross anatomy of the lungs, as well as identify the structure of the lungs. On the next sketch you will see the organs and structures of the respiratory system. You can see the nasal passage, you can see the oral cavity there, the pharynx, the larynx, the trachea, and then as we go down you can see the lung with the different structures of the bronchus and the bronchioles. We're going to start with the nasal cavity and the nose. The nose is the organ of smell. Air enters the nose via the nostrils to the nasal cavity. When you look in your book on page 263 and figure 10.2, you will see all the bones forming the nasal cavity. The nostrils are the route of air entry and consist of a large irregular cavity divided into two by a septum. The nose has a rich blood supply and is lined with mucous membranes which warm the air that is breathed in. The epithelium lining the nose contains cilia. If you can remember, the meaning of the word cilia is small hair. These cilia capture dust and other particles and act as a filter. The functions of the nose you will find in your textbook. It suffices for me to say that the main functions is the warming, filtering and cleaning and humidification of the air, and it also helps with smell. We're going to move on to the pharynx. The pharynx is situated at the back of the mouth and the throat, and the tonsils are situated here, and so is the opening from the ear. We also find the cilia present here in the pharynx, and this cilia also helps to move the mucus along. The pharynx consists of the nasopharynx, of course, which is behind the nose, and that contains the adenoids, which is lymphatic tissue and helps in the immunity of the person. But we also have the oropharynx. The oropharynx is situated behind the ear and contains the tonsils, also lymphatic tissue, and also the opening to the middle ear. That is why often we find that when there's a problem with the tonsils, that we also get infection of the middle ear. Please look on your textbook on page 264 to see the structures which is associated with the pharynx. Okay, we now move on to the laryngopharynx. So the laryngopharynx extends from the oropharynx above and continues as the esophagus below with the larynx anteriorly. Okay, the functions of the laryngopharynx is a passageway for air and food. It helps with the warming and humidifying of the air once again. It also assists hearing, protection, and it also helps with speech. Okay, the next one is the larynx. The larynx links the laryngopharynx and the trachea just behind the tongue. The larynx contains the vocal cords. In the larynx we find the epiglottis. The epiglottis covers the entrance to the larynx, which closes when a person swallows so that no food can enter into the trachea. The larynx consists of the thyroid cartilage, the epiglottis, the cricoid cartilage, the cuneiform cartilage, and the erythronoid cartilage. Please look at your figure on page 10.4 and page 264 to see the pathway of air from the nose to the larynx, as well as figure 10.6. When you look at the functions of the larynx, it is the passageway for air in and out of the trachea. The epiglottis valve that we've already discussed prevents foreign objects like food and fluid or anything to enter into the lungs, and it also makes swallowing possible. It produces sound in the larynx through the vibration of the vocal cords. The vocal cords are situated in the larynx, and it also has a mucous lining which filters the air from small particles. When we look at the trachea, the common word for trachea is your windpipe. And the trachea is a continuation of the larynx and is situated in the midline of the neck. It stretches down behind the sternum. The sternum, as you can remember, is the breastbone. and it branches inside the chest cavity into two bronchi, one bronchus going to each lung. The trachea is composed of 16 to 20 incomplete C-shaped rings of hyaline cartilage situated one above the other. Posterior, the cartilages are incomplete and connective tissue and involuntary muscle form the posterior wall of the trachea. The hyaline cartilage support and protect the trachea. Okay, now we're going to look at the lungs and the structures that we find within the lungs. On this slide you will see a picture of the lungs. The same picture you will find on your textbooks. You will also see at the bottom of the picture that there's a diagram of the alveoli and what it looks like. Okay, so the lungs are situated in the thoracic cavity on either side of the sternum. And you'll see that on figure 10.13 plus figure 10.4. The lungs are cone-shaped and have an apex. They are actually formed in the form of a triangle, which rises from the root of the neck and then the base lies on the diaphragm. We have the costal surface against the ribs and the mediastinal surface against the mediastinum. The mediastinum is a membranous partition that is found between the lungs. The right lung consists of 3 lobes and the left of 2. When we look at the anatomy of the thoracic cavity, you will find that on the left-hand side you find the heart. And that is why also you find the left lung is smaller than the right lung and that there's only 2 lobes in the left lung. Each lobe is divided into lobules and contains the bronchial tree, blood vessels, lymph vessels, connective tissues, and the nerve supply. The pleura is a closed sac of serous membranes that covers the lung and is filled with serous fluid that prevents friction in the event of breathing. The pleura consists of the visceral pleura and the parietal pleura. And as we said, between these 2 pleura we find the pleural cavity filled with serous fluid. We're now going to discuss the bronchi and the bronchioli. The lungs are composed of the bronchi and smaller air passages. The alveoli, connective tissues, blood vessels, lymph vessels, and nerves. There are 2 bronchi, which go, of course, the one to the right lung and the other one to the left lung. These bronchi divide in smaller branches, which also again divides into still smaller bronchioli. In the end, they end up into the alveoli, and in the alveoli we find the exchanges of gases takes place. The gas exchange takes place from the alveoli, where the oxygen moves from a high percentage oxygen from the alveoli into the small capillaries of the bloodstream. When you look in your textbook on page 274, figure 10.18, you can see the bronchioli and the alveoli. They are the structures in the lobes of the lung. The lobes are divided by connective tissues into lobules. Each lobule is supplied with oxygen by terminal bronchioli, and they subdivide into respiratory bronchioli, alveolar ducts, and large numbers of alveoli. Each person actually has 150 million alveoli in an adult lung. And this is where gas exchange takes place. From the alveoli, we find the oxygen going from a high concentration of oxygen to a lower concentration of oxygen that is then in the capillaries of the blood system. The functions of the lungs are mainly gas exchange in the alveoli of the lungs. There's also a separating of carbon dioxide and water vapor, as well as the helping with airflow for voice production. When you look at the slide and you look at a diagram of the alveoli, you'll see that the oxygen goes from the high concentration of oxygen that's in the alveoli to the lower concentration of oxygen in the bloodstream. So you'll find where you see the blue blood molecules on your sketch, that is where the blood is very poor in oxygen, and the oxygen or the CO2 then goes out into the alveoli, and that is then breathed out. The last slide that we're looking at shows you the gas exchange that occurs in the lungs. We have now come to the end of the lecture, and I hope you have all found it very interesting. Take your textbook, go through your textbook, and look at all the different figures, and take your study guide, look at your outcomes, and at the end of the study unit you then answer all the questions in the study guide. And next time we're going to look at one of the other structures or one of the other systems of anatomy. Thank you.